The fewer soldiers Gideon had, the more certain God became that he would win. Every soldier God removed from that army was removing a reason for Israel to say they had done it themselves. Judges 7 verse 2 records God's exact reason: the army was too large for him to get the credit he was owed. You have been asking God for more. More resources, more support, more people standing with you before you believe the assignment is possible. And that request feels reasonable, because more usually does help. But Gideon had more. 32,000 men answered the call against Midian, and God's first response to that number was not approval. It was reduction. Many of you will push back on this. Good. Because this is the part of Gideon's story most people skip past on their way to the trumpets and torches. Part 1. The problem was never the size of the enemy. It was the size of the army. Judges 7 verse 2. The Lord said to Gideon, "You have too many men for me to deliver Midian into their hands, in order that Israel may not boast against me that her own strength has saved her." Read that sentence again. God does not say the army is too small to win. He says it is too large. The Midianite host is described earlier as thick as locusts, camels without number, an enemy vastly outnumbering Israel's 32,000. And still God's concern was not insufficient force. It was excess credit. This is not how anyone plans a battle. Every military instinct built into a human mind says gather more, not less, recruit further, arm heavier, multiply the numbers until the outcome feels statistically guaranteed. God's opening move in this account contradicts that instinct entirely. He is not solving for whether Israel can win. Victory over Midian was never actually in question once God committed to delivering it. He is solving for what Israel would believe about themselves on the morning after the battle ended. But here is what nobody told you. The Hebrew phrase for boast against me is titperalai, from a root meaning to glorify or beautify oneself. This is not casual pride God is guarding against. It is Israel constructing a version of the story where their own strength becomes the glorified center, with God pushed to the margins of a victory he orchestrated. God was not managing Gideon's odds. He was managing the story that would get told afterward. Part 2. The first reduction targeted fear. The second targeted comfort. Judges 7 verse 3. Announce now to the people, whoever trembles with fear may turn back. 22,000 went home, leaving 10,000. Over 2/3 of the army left after a single sentence. Gideon watched his forces collapse by design, not by desertion. This was not attrition. This was God systematically removing every man whose presence would later get mistaken for the reason Israel won. Think about that for a second. 10,000 men remained, and God still was not finished. Most generals in Gideon's position would have stopped there. 10,000 against overwhelming numbers already felt like enough of a risk. God's math ran in the opposite direction from every military instinct Gideon had. Part 3. The second test filtered for something almost no one would have thought to test. Judges 7 verses 5 to 6. Separate those who lap the water with their tongues as a dog laps from those who kneel down to drink. 300 lapped with their hands to their mouths. All the rest knelt to drink. This test had nothing to do with strength, courage, or skill. It measured alertness. The men who stayed upright and watchful while drinking, versus the men who knelt fully, vulnerable, focused entirely on the water in front of them. 300 remained. Notice what this filter did not select for. It did not select for the strongest arms or the most experienced fighters. It selected for men who stayed alert even in a moment of ordinary need, men who could not fully switch off their awareness even to drink from a stream. God was not building an elite unit by any measure Gideon would have recognized walking into that test. He was selecting for a posture, not a skill set, and that posture happened to belong to a small minority of the men still standing. Now stop. Many of you will push back on this. Good. Because a force reduced from 32,000 to 300 is not a minor adjustment. It is a 99% reduction against an enemy already described as too numerous to count. By every visible standard, God had just guaranteed a defeat. Gideon had to lead men into battle knowing the numbers made no natural sense at all. Part 4. God gave Gideon evidence before the battle, not after it. Judges 7 verses 13 to 14. A man was telling a friend his dream. A loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp and struck the tent so hard it overturned. His friend answered, "This is the sword of Gideon. God has given Midian into his hands." Gideon overheard this dream from an enemy soldier, not from an angel, not from a prophet, but from the very camp he was afraid of. The confirmation came from the mouth of the men he was up against. Let that land. Gideon worshipped on the spot after hearing that dream, before a single sword was drawn. The proof of the outcome preceded the outcome. He was given certainty while still standing at 10-to-1 odds, or worse, with a fraction of his original force. Part 5. The moral dilemma at the center of God's math. Tell me honestly in the comments, if God reduced your resources by 99% right before your biggest assignment, would you have trusted the math or walked away from the mission? Gideon had every rational reason to conclude God had abandoned the plan rather than perfected it. The tension is real. Obedience here did not look like faith from the outside. It looked like a man leading 300 people toward a massacre, and nothing in the visible evidence argued against that conclusion until the moment the trumpets actually sounded. Part 6. The victory was won without a single sword clashing against another. Judges 7 verses 19 to 21. Gideon and his 300 blew trumpets, broke jars, and held torches, and the entire Midianite camp threw down their weapons and fled in confusion, turning on each other in the dark. 300 men did not outfight an army thick as locusts. They did not fight it at all. The battle was won through noise, light, and confusion before a single blade was raised by Israel's side. There was no ambiguity left about who had done this. You have been treating your lack of resources, of support, of numbers, as evidence God is not with the assignment. Gideon's story says the opposite is at least as likely to be true. What you are calling insufficient may be exactly small enough for what happens next to be unmistakably his. The 300 were not enough by any human measure, and that was the entire point of choosing them. Every number God removed from that army was removing a future excuse for someone else to take credit for what only he was going to do. If you want to see what it looks like when God takes the version of you that feels least qualified and puts you in charge of nations anyway, watch the video on screen now. A man who said he did not know how to speak was appointed a prophet before he had a vocabulary for it. Type, "not by might," in the comments if you are trusting today that what God is doing does not depend on how much you currently have.